The millionaire's polished shoes clicked across the cold hospital floor. He checked his watch, frowned, scrolled his phone until a sudden sound made him look up. A little girl in worn clothes hugged a patched teddy bear, whispering to it as if it were alive. Her legs dangled, swinging her eyes, searching the hallway. He almost looked away, but froze when she said softly, "Mom promised to come back after surgery." His chest tightened. He stepped closer, asked her name, and when he saw it on the chart, his world collapsed in a single heartbeat. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you silently, arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. Rain drizzled down the wide glass panels of Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. In the waiting area, fluorescent lights flickered against rows of worn blue plastic chairs. The air carried the sterile bite of disinfectant mixed with the bitter scent of cheap coffee from a vending machine at the far end of the hallway. Nathan Cole, 36, CEO of a rising tech empire, sat there impatiently. He had checked his Rolex for the fourth time in under 5 minutes. To Nathan, time was the most expensive commodity. Every passing minute could have been spent negotiating contracts, securing investors, or scanning quarterly reports. Yet here he was, not by choice, but because Clara Jennings, his head of PR, had insisted. A young millionaire donating blood at a public hospital, she had argued. The media will love it. With a product launch on the horizon, Nathan had agreed, though reluctantly. A few staged photos, a press-friendly gesture of corporate responsibility, a cheap price to pay for public goodwill. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through endless emails. Numbers, charts, deals. His world was clean, efficient, and predictable. His thumb hovered over a new message marked urgent irritation, tightening his jaw. Then he noticed her. 3 seats away sat a small girl, no older than 7, hugging a battered teddy bear. Ella Carter. Her curly brown hair was clipped on one side with a chipped silver star. She wore jeans with a frayed patch on the knee sneakers, gone dull from wear, and a lavender t-shirt far too big for her small frame. But her eyes stopped him wide, dark, and far too serious for her age. The teddy bear, Mr. Patch, was clearly handmade. Its fabric was faded, its seams stitched and restitched with mismatched scraps, its button eyes uneven. The child whispered softly to it as if confiding in a trusted friend. Nathan looked away. Children in his view meant chaos. And chaos was something he had meticulously erased from his life. Yet every few seconds his gaze drifted back. No adult appeared. No one sat with her. She was utterly alone, save for the toy in her arms. Something inside Nathan shifted discomfort, almost like guilt. A child shouldn't be waiting alone in a hospital like this. He cleared his throat, his voice unusually tentative. "Hi. That's quite an interesting bear you've got there." Ella lifted her head, surprised but not afraid. Her voice was steady. "His name is Mr. Patch. My mum made him for me." Nathan blinked. Handmade. Patched together from scraps, yet carried with pride. A creation born not from wealth, but from care. He found himself asking almost against his will, "And where's your mum now?" Ella hugged the bear tighter. Her gaze fell. "She said she'd come back after the surgery. I'm still waiting." The simple truth in her small voice cut through Nathan like a blade. He felt his chest tighten in a way he hadn't in years. For a moment, all the noise of his emails, his company, his schedule disappeared. And just like that, something had begun. The waiting room clock ticked with merciless precision. 47 minutes had passed since Nathan first sat down, and every second grated on him. Normally his patience stretched only as far as profits and projections allowed. Hospitals with their antiseptic smell and slow rhythm tested him in ways boardrooms never could. But something else gnawed at him now. The girl. Ella hadn't moved much since he first noticed her. She sat with the solemnity of someone far older than 7, Mr. Patch cradled like a fragile heirloom. Every so often she would whisper to the bear, then tilt her head as if listening for its reply. The innocence of the act should have amused him, maybe even irritated him. Instead, it left a hollow ache in his chest he couldn't name. Nathan stood abruptly, the scrape of his chair startling in the hushed room. He strode to the reception desk phone, clenched tightly in his hand, though he hadn't checked it in several minutes. The receptionist, a woman with greying hair pulled into a tight bun, looked up from her monitor. Her tone was polite but tired. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," Nathan said, sharper than intended. He drew a breath, softened his voice. "There's a little girl waiting over there. Alone. She's been here for hours." He gestured toward Ella, who now swung her legs slowly, gaze fixed on the floor tiles. "Her name's Ella Carter. Her mother's in surgery. Someone should be looking after her." The receptionist frowned. "Are you family?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Family. The word itself was a wound. "No," Nathan said at last. "Just someone concerned." "I understand, sir," the woman replied carefully. "But you know we have strict confidentiality rules." Nathan leaned forward, his tone hardening into the one that closed multi-million-dollar deals. "I'm not asking for medical details. I just want to know if anyone realizes a child has been sitting alone for hours." The woman hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Ella again. Something softened in her expression the same way a stone begins to erode under the years of tide. "Hold on." Her fingers danced over the keyboard. Nathan waited, jaw tight. Behind him, the murmur of voices and distant echoes of intercom announcements filled the sterile air. He could almost hear his assistant's voice in his head, reminding him of the call with investors he was already late for. None of it mattered. Not right now. The receptionist's brows drew together. "Here it is. Carter Rachel. Arrived earlier this afternoon. Emergency trauma. Victim of a car accident on Main Street. Multiple pedestrians were hit." Nathan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "And the child," his voice was low, unsteady. "No additional contacts listed," the woman said. "Just mother and daughter. No father. No extended family in the file." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She glanced at him, hesitating again. Then, in a lowered voice, she said, "I shouldn't do this, but maybe you can help." She pulled a slim folder from beneath the counter, sliding it partially toward him. "This is basic information only. Nothing confidential." Nathan's eyes scanned the page quickly, too quickly. For a heartbeat, the words blurred meaningless lines of ink. Then one line snapped into focus. Rachel Cole. The name struck him like a blow to the chest. His throat constricted. The sterile light above seemed to flicker, though he knew it hadn't. Rachel. Not a stranger. Not just another patient file. His sister. The sister he had left behind 10 years ago when ambition demanded sacrifices. The sister he had argued with, cut ties with, convinced himself he no longer needed. His hand trembled on the counter. The receptionist's voice pierced through the phone. "Sir, are you all right?" Nathan tried to speak, but the words caught. Finally, in a voice that didn't sound like his own, he managed Rachel. "Is my sister?" The woman's eyes widened. "Then, the girl." My niece Nathan finished the syllables heavy on his tongue. He turned then, almost afraid of what he would see. Ella still sat patiently, Mr. Patch tucked under her chin. She looked small against the vastness of the waiting room, yet unshaken, as if she had learned long ago to expect nothing from the world. When her gaze lifted and found his, something inside Nathan fractured. She tilted her head slightly, curious, hopeful, as though she sensed, without knowing, that the stranger staring at her was no stranger at all. For the first time in years, Nathan Cole felt powerless. Not to markets or rivals or deadlines, but to a truth he couldn't ignore. His sister was lying on an operating table fighting for her life, and the little girl, hugging a patched-up bear, was blood of his blood. The sterile hum of the hospital grew louder as the hours stretched on. Nathan sat across from Ella now, not quite knowing how it had happened. One moment he'd been pacing the corridor, phone buzzing relentlessly in his pocket, and the next he had lowered himself into the hard plastic chair opposite the child. Ella didn't seem surprised. Children had a way of accepting what adults overanalyzed. She just glanced up from Mr. Patch, gave a small nod, and returned to stroking the bear's frayed ear. Nathan cleared his throat. "So, Ella," the name still felt strange in his mouth, weighted with the knowledge of blood ties. "You've been here a long time." The girl nodded solemnly. "Mom's still in surgery. Dr. Patel said it might take hours. I don't mind waiting. Mr. Patch and I keep each other company." Nathan studied her. She spoke with the calmness of someone who had been forced to grow used to waiting. He wondered how many times she had sat in places like this patient while adults around her scrambled. "Do you have anyone else here with you?" he asked gently. Ella shook her head. "It's just me and Mum. Always has been." Her small fingers traced the stitched seam of the bear. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "But Mum said if anything ever happened, I should tell someone about the blue box." Nathan frowned. "Blue box." Ella looked up at him as though testing whether he could be trusted. "It's in our apartment, a little tin box under the dresser. Mom said it has everything important. She told me to keep it safe, and if she couldn't, be around, I should make sure someone opened it." The weight of her words pressed down on Nathan. His sister Rachel had thought ahead, planned for the unthinkable, and entrusted her child with instructions no 7-year-old should have to carry. "What's in the box?" he asked carefully. Ella shrugged. "Papers, letters, stuff about her job. She never let me look too close. She just said it was important. That one day it might help make things fair." Make things fair. The phrase cut deeper than it should have. Nathan had spent years mastering markets contracts, the ruthless pursuit of power. Yet his sister had been quietly fighting battles of survival, the kind of unfairness money alone couldn't erase. His phone buzzed again. A call from Clara Jennings lit up the screen. He let it ring until it went dark. Ella tilted her head. "You're not leaving, are you?" The question startled him. "No. I'll stay until your mum's out of surgery." For the first time, Ella's mouth curved into a small smile. It was fleeting, but it lit her face with a warmth that disarmed him. She clutched Mr. Patch tighter and whispered to the bear, "See, I told you someone would help." Nathan leaned back, unsettled. He wasn't used to being cast in the role of helper-savior or even family. And yet, here he was, tethered by invisible threads to a child who had no one else to turn to. Hours later, as the night deepened, a nurse finally emerged from the double doors. "Family of Rachel Cole," she called. Nathan rose instantly. Ella scrambled up too, Mr. Patch pressed against her chest. The nurse looked between them, confusion flickering. "She's my sister," Nathan said quickly. His voice didn't waver. "This is her daughter." The nurse nodded, ushering them closer. "Your sister is stable, but the surgery was complicated. She'll need time in the ICU and there will be long-term care. For now, she's sedated." Ella's small hand found Nathan's. She didn't ask for permission. She simply gripped it, her trust as natural as breathing. Nathan stared down at her fingers curled around his fragile yet firm, and something inside him shifted. The nurse continued, "We'll need immediate family to sign off on certain matters. If there's paperwork, documents." Ella looked up at Nathan. Her voice was soft but steady. "The blue box. Mum said that's what we'd need." Nathan's heart lurched. The words weren't just a child's memory anymore. They were a call to action. And for the first time in years, he realized he might not have the luxury of turning away. Nathan Cole had walked through countless penthouses, boardrooms, and estates that stretched wide enough to echo, yet he had never stood in a place that felt as small and suffocating as his sister's apartment. The Rainier Valley building looked fragile from the outside, its paint peeling in patches, the stairs creaking under each step. Inside, the narrow hallway carried the smell of fried onions from a neighbour's unit mixed with the faint scent of lavender candles his sister must have lit in an attempt to soften the edges of poverty. Ella walked ahead of him, her sneakers squeaking against the scuffed linoleum. She didn't notice the peeling paint, the sagging ceiling, or the chipped moulding. To her, this wasn't broken. This was home. Nathan paused in the small living room, taking it in with an outsider's eyes. A couch sagged at the centre, its fabric threadbare. A table wobbled slightly under a pile of unopened mail. But what caught him most were the drawings taped across the refrigerator door. Coloured suns, stick figure families, a teddy bear with mismatched eyes. Each one bore Ella's name written in bright marker. The sight hit him harder than any investor's criticism ever had. While he had been negotiating contracts worth millions, his sister had been taping a child's drawings to a refrigerator in a rented apartment, fighting battles he had never seen. Ella tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle Nathan, it's in her room. She told me so." He followed her down the hallway, his tall frame brushing against the narrow walls. The bedroom door creaked when she pushed it open. Inside, the space was as modest as the rest of the apartment. A sewing machine sat in the corner, its pedal worn from constant use. Threads of different colours lined the shelves in neat rows, though the spools were almost empty. Nathan stood frozen, staring at the sewing machine. Memories surged. His sister Rachel, at 18, bent over their mother's old Singer machine, patching his school uniform after their father's death. "Hold still," she teased back then, her hair falling across her face. She had always been stitching, mending, repairing. Not just fabric, but everything he broke. And yet he had left. Ella knelt by the dresser, the teddy bear clutched under her arm. She said, "It's in a box. A blue one. Right here." Her small fingers reached into the shadowy gap beneath the furniture. After a moment, she pulled out a dented metal box, its blue paint scratched and faded. Nathan crouched down beside her, his expensive shoes squeaking against the worn carpet. For a man who could sign away millions with the stroke of a pen, his hands trembled as he touched the latch. "Can I open it?" he asked. Ella hugged Mr. Patch tighter, then nodded solemnly. She said it's important. The latch clicked open, and Nathan lifted the lid. Inside lay evidence of a life fought quietly, but fiercely. There were pay stubs with numbers that didn't add up, 40 hours worked, 20 paid. Letters denying overtime. Receipts marked rejected. Beside them, handwritten notes in Rachel's careful script. April 63, HRs worked, paid 38. Short by 25 HRs. Each page was a wound carefully documented, a silent cry for justice that had never been answered. At the very bottom lay a folded letter. On the front, in Rachel's handwriting, were the words, "For Ella, if I cannot be there." Nathan hesitated. His throat tightened as he unfolded the paper, his eyes moving slowly across the ink. "My dearest Ella, if you are holding this, it means I couldn't keep my promise to always come back to you. Inside this box are truths no one wanted to hear. Hours I worked, wages. They stole the dignity they thought wouldn't matter to women like me. It is proof not just for courts, but for you. Proof that we were worth more than they gave us. If you must choose, choose courage. Truth will always outlast money. I love you, Mom." The letter shook in Nathan's hands. He had read countless contracts, but never had words cut through him like these. He could almost hear Rachel's voice, steady, tired, but unbroken. Ella's small hand touched his sleeve. "Does this mean we can make it fair now?" Her eyes, wide with innocence, looked up at him with something far heavier than hope trust. Nathan swallowed hard. He had built empires on numbers, manipulated markets with words, and crushed rivals with strategy. Yet, in this moment, sitting on a worn carpet beside his niece, he felt powerless and strangely more human than ever. "Yes," he said finally, his voice rough. "We can." Ella nodded once, as though satisfied, and placed Mr. Patch inside the box to guard the papers. "He'll keep it safe. He always does." That night, back at his penthouse, Nathan didn't open his laptop or answer the dozens of emails piling up. Instead, he sat at the kitchen counter with the blue box in front of him. The city skyline glittered outside his glass walls, but for the first time, he didn't see success. He saw emptiness. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he had never thought he'd call. Seattle Legal Aid. When the weary voice of an attorney answered, Nathan introduced himself, not as a CEO, not as a man of power, but as a brother. "I need to file something," he said quietly. "On behalf of my sister. On behalf of workers who were silenced." The attorney promised to review the documents. "If what you're saying is accurate, Mr. Cole, this could open a serious case, maybe bigger than you realize." Nathan looked at the box again. "Good," he replied. When he returned to the hospital the next morning, Ella sat in the waiting room. Mr. Patch perched on her lap. She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Did you keep it safe?" He crouched down and touched the teddy bear gently. "Yes. And soon the whole world will know what your mum tried to say." Ella's small shoulders relaxed. She whispered to the bear, "See, Mr. Patch, Mum was right. We just had to wait." And as Nathan stood, the blue box heavy in his hands, he realized that for all his billions, it was his niece, a child hugging a patched-up teddy bear, who had taught him what it truly meant to fight for something real. The ICU was quiet that morning, hushed in that strange way hospitals always seem to be, not silent, never silent, but carrying a tone of reverence. Machines hummed softly. Monitors ticked out their steady rhythms. Nurses padded across the polished floors. Nathan sat in the same chair he had occupied for days, his back stiff, his tie loosened. The blue box rested on the floor beside him, tucked safely between his shoes. His head leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, though he wasn't sleeping. Sleep had become a shallow, fragile thing since the accident. Every time he tried, his mind replayed old memories of Rachel, her laughter, her disappointment, the words she'd flung at him a decade ago. Across his lap, Ella dozed, curled up beneath a thin hospital blanket, Mr. Patch tucked under her chin. She breathed softly, her face peaceful in a way children's faces were meant to be untouched for now by the weight of adult grief. Nathan watched her for a moment, marvelling at how easily she trusted him, how quickly she had made space for him in her world when he had been absent for so long. Then came a sound, faint, almost imperceptible at first, a rasp of breath heavier than the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. Nathan straightened instantly, his gaze snapping to the bed. Rachel's eyelids fluttered. He froze, hardly daring to breathe. For 2 weeks she had lain motionless, caught in the limbo between life and absence. Doctors had said it might take time. They had warned him not to expect sudden miracles. But there it was. Her hand twitched against the sheet. Her brow furrowed faintly. Rachel Nathan's voice was soft, cautious, like someone approaching a wild bird. Her eyes opened slowly, sluggishly, adjusting to the light. They looked glazed, confused at first, but then sharpened, taking in the sterile ceiling, the machines, and finally him. For an instant her gaze hardened, disbelief, shock, and perhaps an old wound opening fresh again. Then her eyes shifted, landing on Ella, asleep in his lap. A tremor passed through Rachel's lips. She tried to speak, but the effort caught in her throat. Nathan stood quickly, carefully sliding Ella to the chair and stepping closer. "Don't try to talk," he said, his voice uneven. "You're safe. You're here." But she did speak, her voice rough and broken, barely more than a whisper. "Ella." Nathan reached for her hand before he realized what he was doing. It felt fragile, paper-thin beneath his palm, yet warm, alive. "She's here. She's okay. She's been with me." Rachel's eyes closed briefly in relief, a tear slipping free despite her exhaustion. When she opened them again, they fixed on Nathan. And in that gaze lay 10 years of silence, 10 years of questions, 10 years of hurt. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." The words were pitifully small compared to the gulf between them, but they were all he had. A quiet stir beside him broke the moment. Ella shifted in the chair, yawning, blinking her big brown eyes open. It took her a second to register what was different. Then she saw. "Mum." She scrambled down, nearly tripping on the blanket, and rushed to the bedside. "Mummy, you're awake." Her voice carried the clarity of joy that no hospital walls could contain. She pressed her small hand against Rachel's arm. "See, I told you. I told Mr. Patch you'd come back." Rachel's lips curved into the faintest smile, her free hand trembling as she brushed a curl from Ella's forehead. "My brave girl," she whispered. Nathan turned away for a moment, blinking rapidly. He was unprepared for the rawness of the scene, for how it struck something deep in him he hadn't touched in years. Ella clambered onto the edge of the bed with the nurse's help still chattering in her little voice. Uncle Nathan stayed with me. He let me have pancakes and we drew pictures, and he even tried sushi. He was terrible at using chopsticks, but I showed him, and we visited you every day. Rachel's tired eyes flicked back to Nathan. Disbelief mingled with confusion. Uncle Nathan. She mouthed the words silently, as though testing their reality. Nathan cleared his throat. I found the blue box, he said quietly, unsure if this was the right moment, but compelled to speak. Ella showed me. I know what you've been fighting for. Rachel's breath caught, her gaze sharpened, filling with both alarm and something like relief. You. She coughed, voice too weak to finish. He lifted the box onto the tray table beside her bed. Its battered blue paint looked out of place among the sterile whites and greys of the ICU. I read the letter. I know what they did to you at the factory. I've already spoken with legal aid. This doesn't end here, Rachel. Not anymore. Her eyes filled again, though this time the tears weren't only from pain. She turned her head slightly toward Ella, who was busy whispering secrets to Mr. Patch. Then back to Nathan. Why now? It was the question he had dreaded. He lowered himself into the chair, leaning forward. Because I was a coward before. Because I thought leaving was the only way to build a life. And I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time. Rachel studied him in silence. Her body was frail, her face pale, but her gaze carried the same steady fire it always had. At last, she whispered, Stay then. Don't leave again. Nathan's throat tightened. He nodded once, unable to speak. Ella, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, tugged on his sleeve. Uncle Nathan, when Mom comes home, can we all live together, you, me and her? We could have pancakes every Sunday. Nathan glanced at Rachel. For the first time in years, her expression softened into something not hardened by bitterness or survival, something closer to hope. He managed a smile for Ella. Yes, pancakes every Sunday. Ella squealed softly, hugging both her mother's arm and Nathan's hand in one motion, bridging them together. And as the machines kept their steady rhythm, and the morning sun slipped through the blinds to paint the room in fragile light, the Cole family broken, scattered and stitched back together with threads of love, regret and second chances began at last to awaken. Rachel's discharge from the hospital felt both triumphant and terrifying. She was still fragile, leaning on a cane, and tiring after only a few steps. But the moment the elevator doors opened into Nathan's penthouse, Ella clapped her hands in delight. See, Mum, I told you, it's like a castle in the sky, she exclaimed, tugging her mother forward. Rachel paused, her eyes widening at the high ceilings, the wall of glass overlooking the glittering city, the polished marble that reflected the afternoon sun. It was a far cry from their cramped apartment in Rainier Valley. For a moment she looked uncertain, almost out of place. Nathan noticed. It's just walls and windows, he said quietly, almost shyly. What matters is who's inside them. Rachel glanced at him, and though no words passed between them, something in her expression softened. The days that followed were a blur of adjustments. Mornings began with pancakes. Ella insisted on it, declaring Sunday breakfast should happen every day until her mother was all better. Nathan tried to flip them the way she had taught him, sometimes failing spectacularly, but his niece's laughter always turned mistakes into victories. Afternoons were for physical therapy sessions. Nathan arranged a specialist to come to the penthouse, transforming his minimalist guest room into a space filled with resistance bands and exercise mats. Rachel winced through the stretches, her face pale with effort, but Ella sat beside her with Mr. Patch cheering every small improvement. "See, Mum, you're stronger already," Ella would say, as if sheer belief could heal bones. Evenings became family time. The sterile silence that once haunted Nathan's penthouse gave way to the sound of crayons scratching on paper, the smell of tea steeping in the kitchen, and the hum of quiet conversation. Ella taped her drawings on the fridge and arranged her toys across the living room, leaving trails of childhood that Nathan never bothered to clean up. He found himself liking it. Of course there were missteps. Nathan forgot the timing of Rachel's medications once and panicked, calling the nurse in the middle of the night. He burned pasta until the smoke alarm shrieked. He missed a conference call with investors because Ella insisted he attend her puppet show with Mr. Patch. And yet for the first time in years, the missed calls didn't feel like failures. They felt like choices, the right ones. Late one evening, after Ella had fallen asleep, Nathan stood by the window, with Rachel at his side. She leaned on her cane, her reflection faint in the glass. "You've changed," she murmured, not accusing, not forgiving, just stating a fact. Nathan's throat tightened. "I'm trying." Rachel's eyes lingered on Ella's sleeping form across the room, then back on him. "Then maybe that's enough for now." It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was a beginning. And for Nathan Cole, beginnings mattered more than endings ever had. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.